Hello, I'm Cherie, Strategy and Innovation Director at Manifesto. I recently interviewed Ben Sykes, who heads up Innovation and Digital at Blood Cancer UK, on their experience of our new AI Wayfinder programme. Blood Cancer UK faced a challenge common across the mission-led sector, a genuine interest in AI with some activity already underway, but no actionable strategic plan to coordinate usage and prioritise where it can really have the most impact. Watch on to learn about Wayfinder and how it's helped them unlock high-impact AI experiments and create an actionable, coherent roadmap to drive responsible, mission-aligned AI adoption. The first thing I asked Ben was, what AI challenges were you facing before you began Wayfinder, and how did Wayfinder help you work through them?
I guess the best way of articulating it is we probably just couldn't see the wood for the trees. We couldn't work out what would have meaningful value and would last the test of time in a world that's changing so fast versus things that might get deprecated really quickly. So things where you introduce new technologies and you suddenly think, I'm not sure we've done a piece of work here that technology might render obsolete in a few months. I think that was really challenging for us, and sort of, I guess, therefore, not really a clear picture of where to start. I guess the other thing really was that we didn't have a clear picture of what our existing tech stack and platforms that were available to us would enable us to do. We didn't really have a sense of where we would look to understand what that could enable. So we were a bit sort of stuck. We knew that we could do experiments, but we had no sense of how we could move from that being a contained experiment within our team or within a team versus what that might look like if you expand it out to the organisation. I guess without committing to huge costs, which was the worry as well. You can contain this small experiment at low cost, or you can do this thing, but it costs an absolute fortune. So that was kind of where we were sort of stuck, I guess.
Okay. And how did the sort of Wayfinder process in particular help unstick? Were there any things that were particularly helpful with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most critical thing was that sight of how. I think the thing that really unlocked it for me was when we had the session, me, you, and James, Ben, and we looked at those individual experiments and started to think about what does scaling those experiments look like, and how do you go from something being quite potentially contained between our team and one other team in the organisation to something that could benefit the organisation more broadly. So thinking about, for example, the example where we were talking about using AI to support us to write text messages, to support us to steward people, and how that might be able to scale into much more holistic, modular sort of content support for the whole organisation. And I think that the idea of being able to do that and do those experiments while simultaneously doing the foundations, rather than having to, for example, either do all these bespoke experiments that I think we would have been questioned on, does this have the impact that we, the organisation needs, versus pitching, we want to do all this foundational work, which will cost quite a lot of money, take up possibly our team's whole time for a year. And again, I suspect the response would have been, okay, fine, but what are we doing for the next year? Because by that point, we'll be far behind. I think that being able to see that we could simultaneously, and almost like a lot of it within my team, simultaneously run those two streams to have impact, I think was a big unlock for me, really.
Cool. I remember being in the sort of more early stages of the process when we were doing that value chain workshop and bringing other team, representatives from different teams together, and someone making the comment that they'd sort of realised that AI is just a way of solving. It's not this sort of new mysterious thing. It's a practical way of solving some of the business sort of problem pain points. How did you experience those what's your view on framing it in that way and looking at it through the value chain? How did that work for you?
I think it was great. I think one of the learnings that I got throughout experience was how different we needed to position it for different parts of the business. So I think that helping an individual across the business to understand how this could directly impact a problem that they were facing within their area, whilst also, and I think this was pretty tricky, but I definitely think we got there, and I think it was a great outcome, whilst also helping the exec team to see like the bigger impact of doing these pieces of work could have on the whole business. Because there was always this push from our exec side to be like, we want to go, you'll have got this sense, we want to go big with this, we've got huge ambition. I think they in turn were sort of being pushed by our board of trustees to say, what can you do for, like, what can AI do for us? And I think being able to connect those dots together and helping that to see that through, and helping someone who's maybe in a very specific role in the organization see, if we do this, it'll have an impact on you. But then being able to also say to those people who care more about the bigger picture, and this is what that impact will have on the business, I think was really helpful.
Okay. And I guess so having that roadmap for the organisation, so what I'm hearing there is it kind of helps the organisation to see there's progress being made, understand how that's applicable to them, and like show that momentum. Is there any other sort of benefits to having this AI sort of centered roadmap that cuts across the organisation?
I think it will allow my team to get on with our job. I was finding, which sounds a bit strange, but I was finding myself increasingly getting pulled in a lot of different directions with a lot of requests from people who were sort of saying, what are we doing in this space, and can you do it for my team? I think what this does, because it was presented so well back to the exec, and because there was a general agreement that it felt like the direction was a really strong one, it means that I can now say, this is the direction we are taking this work. And I think people will, I mean, it remains to be seen slightly, but I think people will give us the space to do that. Because I always feel if you're sort of slightly ambiguous in your plans, people go, well, there's a bit of ambiguity there, do my thing. Whereas actually we can say we've actually got real clarity on when and why we're doing these 4 things this year, and this is where that should take us. So give us the space. And I actually followed up the brilliant playback you guys did to the exec with I took it to senior leadership team, and my call to them was, one of the main things I said was, you appear to support this direction. I played back where we were at, very positive response. I said, you appear to support the direction we're going in, but we do need the space to do that. So please avoid, like throwing things on our team last minute, because it will move us away from moving in this direction that I think everyone agrees is a good direction. So it's given me more authority to be able to do that, I think. And I think the other thing to say is, I think in a space where people are quite simultaneously excited and mystified by AI, I think having people in yourselves who spoke so confidently and clearly about what it means for a charity to use AI, it gave a confidence that I'm not entirely convinced just internally it's possible to give, unless one of us happen to have extreme AI skills, which we didn't, like we know about tech, but we didn't know specifically about AI. So that's really helped as well. I think like there's been a comfort in hearing from a neutral party, this is where you are and this is a logical path.
Cool. Was there anything that surprised you in the process? Came out through the process?
One of the things that really I realized quite strongly, and I was thinking about this morning, is that I find that with anything else that we launch or anything that we're doing new, if we go away for a while and sort of just work quietly on it in the background, people go, okay, that's fine, they're obviously doing something and it will come back eventually. I found that really wasn't the case with AI. And I think the survey threw that up initially, that if you stop talking about it, there's a perception that you're doing something untoward, or you're planning something that's going to have this dramatic impact. And actually, I think just talking about it, because we were really deliberate, obviously, between the two parties of choosing people who weren't just ultra pro. I think involving people in those decision-making processes and also in the workshops, I think helped people to realize that it wasn't ever designed to be that, but it does exist in a space that I find that nothing else that I work on. I think that really great framing that you did, particularly in that first workshop, where you sort of said to people, this is the reality, this is where we're at, this is where the world is at, helped everyone. I could almost see people relax into going, okay, so we are open-minded about where we take this. This is not a done deal that I am being dragged along with to validate some ideas that I don't necessarily agree with. I feel like we genuinely took people on a journey with us.
So how would you describe how Wayfinder has changed the way Blood Cancer UK is thinking about AI? And I guess it'd be interesting to hear that from sort of ground up. So for the people that were involved in the process as kind of like participants right up until the leadership.
I think there's more of an understanding of the scope of ambition. I think there's much more of a comfort now knowing that there is likely to be a scale at which this actually genuinely does help someone do their job, but is also not likely to entirely threaten their role. And I think that's given, again, talking about giving us the space, when you're not dealing with people panicking at either ends of the business, that can really help you to just focus on what needs to get done. I don't think, that being said, I don't think it's a given that continues if we don't keep pushing at it. I think we need to keep talking about this, and I think that's one thing that I really learned. So that, I think, from the bottom up, I think we've not finished. The reality is we've not finished playing back exactly what the roadmap will look like. And me and Ben have got a meeting next week to run through, like, talking, phasing through, and then we'll play it back to the organisation properly. But I think the people in the workshop have been much more positive. And like I said, there were people in that workshop who definitely were sceptical about the direction we were taking it. And I think we're very pleasantly surprised by how both simultaneously practical, and then once they understood the scale, how much it could impact the business.
If you could just sort of talk about how you describe working with Manifesto throughout the process, what that experience was like.
It's been, like, working with Manifesto has been really brilliant. I think from the first conversation I had with you and when we were just sort of talking about what AI could mean for an organisation, and I got quite excited about sort of your vision for how you could lead charities through this. I think from then on, it's been much more than I guess at every point. What I've experienced previously with agencies is that at the pitch process, you're promised this big thing, and then it sort of gets watered down. And I genuinely feel like probably what we've had here is, it's felt like the opposite. It's felt like, and I reflected this a little bit in one of my survey responses that I filled in. It's felt like we thought there was this thing that was fairly self-contained but would be really useful. But actually it became so comprehensive that I think it'll give us a clarity to work with for at least an absolute basis from which we can build for multiple years. I think it's been great. I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it is, apart from, like, it felt like everyone really cared. There was a lot of skill, but also a lot of passion and a lot of humanness. Like, it felt like we were working with colleagues. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Would you recommend Wayfinder to other organisations? And I guess, like, why?
Yeah, I absolutely recommend Wayfinder. I think if they're unsure about the value that AI might bring to their organisation and clarity, but also I think the really critical thing is, like, the grounding of the context in your business, your charity, your organisation. I think for us that makes a massive difference, because you can read a million things out there, but it'll always be coming from a perspective that is not yours. And an organisation, even if it's a charity, whose mission might be quite different to yours, or whose size might be quite different to yours, I think having that tailored support to do that, I reckon, I was thinking about this, I think it's pushed us forward at least 6 months, if not beyond, in terms of getting, even the fact that we were able to get the right people in the room, speak to a really broad cross-section of the organisation, hear from people who we might not have heard from otherwise, and play back to people who otherwise might not have found the time. I think that's absolutely testament to this being a really great thing to do, and something we didn't regret. And we did this at a very busy time for us, but it worked perfectly for us, and we were always able to be flexible enough to get it done in work that worked with our deadlines.
Would you say there's any like specific expertise that Manifesto brought that maybe you didn't have the resource or expertise internally to deliver?
I think the expertise wise, I think all areas. I don't think we've got an extremely good service designer, we've got a strong innovation team, but I think someone with the understanding of what AI can do for business, I think that impact of the fact that you've seen it in other organizations, and what can happen, and where it can go well, where it can not go well, I think is something that we don't have. We've got people in our team who have worked for a couple of charities, we've got people who worked in private sector, but we haven't had that sort of like more zoomed out view of like what this means to the sector. So lots and lots of skilled people doing very skilled things across the board, but I think it's that bringing people who know AI and know the sector was the like really valuable part of it.
Data, how has this impacted or influenced how you're thinking about the data side of things at all?
We're still sort of working our way through it, I guess. We're sort of trying to, I think what it really helped with was connecting. It's that push and pull of AI when it comes to data for me. It's like the fact that it can help connect platforms, but that we still need to do foundational work to get, if we wanted to put AI on top of our existing data. So that it's really helped with that, actually, and it's helped us to think about, can we move a little bit quicker than potentially we thought? Can we connect our tech stack in less of a technical way, and require less coding potentially, because of the opportunities that AI might afford us, that mean that we can build the foundations quicker. But also, I think it's reinforced the need to do that thinking, because it felt like a nice to do. We were sort of talking to the organization about, we were already talking to the organization about connecting our data foundations, but I think there was a bit of a why. I think it's really helped us to articulate very strongly why. And I think a really great thing that also happened was that realization that if you build the ability, for example, to build much more bespoke journeys for people through and across our user journeys, using AI and using understanding of how people are moving through the system, there's this need to create much more content. So that's where it sort of dovetails really nicely with the fact that we'll be able to build something that writes that content more quickly. So it's really helped with reinforcing that. And one of the things that I was able to do really early when we took the paper for the Data Foundation before the Wayfinder work kicked out. But I was able to say, because it came out really quickly, AI Wayfinder is really backing this direction of travel. So I honestly can't say whether, if I didn't say that, it would have been as easy to get that through, because I was able to say, we need to push this through, because if we don't agree to putting these foundations in place, the stuff that's about to come out of Wayfinder in a month's time, which you seem to really agree with the current direction on, will probably be undermined. So I think it was that they worked together really well to do that, and obviously it was never planned to align as closely as it did, and it was nice that it did, but has absolutely helped to build our case in that area.
How would you summarise the value of Wayfinder in sort of a couple of sentences?
So, yeah, I think for me, the value of the Wayfinder, I genuinely think it could be transformational for the organisation in how we approach AI and in how AI supports us to realise our mission, which is to beat blood cancer, because there are so many different things and activities that we need to undertake to beat that mission, whether that's using our resources better to get us to a better place when we can do more effective blood cancer research, or we can deliver more effective services, or we can just fundraise more effectively, making people, the donations that people give us, go further. And that, I genuinely feel like we've got a plan in place to do that, because we've got all these different experiments. We don't just have one or two that will impact these two parts of the business. We've got all these different experiments that will, I genuinely feel like, impact the business in every way in the next couple of years.